Phoenixes, and welcome to another chat rant coffee talk with me, your mama Phoenix, Daniela Langford, the creative transformational catalyst. All right, honest engine time. Do you tend to react with fear, also expressed as anger or worry, or try and change the mood of a situation to avoid making waves, or keep other people happy? Or better yet, do you sabotage yourself or your projects or your goals? Or persistently get the opposite of what you expect in your conversations and relationships? If any of that is ringing true, you've been unconsciously driven by fear and guilt. Yikes! I know. But don't worry, you're not alone. It's all of us. Fear and guilt have become the main yet unspoken emotional currencies that permeate the interactions in all of our society now. It's cleverly used both collectively and individually to control behavior. These emotions are so deeply woven in your perception that it really can be tricky to recognize all the shapes and expressions that they take. I even still find stuff. It's crazy. And you just work it out. So as a child, I would probably guess that you quickly learned that freedom and self-expression were not part of the successful life equation, right? Most likely, your parents or caregivers unknowingly repeated child-raising patterns similar to their parents and their grandparents based on their wounded perception and emotional disconnection. Is it making sense now? It's crazy. Domino effect. You internalize those dynamics. You watch the people around you and the dynamics between you and the people that you loved, and that is what becomes the aspect of the ego sometimes called the sense of otherness. This voice or feeling carries the figures and patterns that still judge and control your behavior from within. That's the naysayer that we talk about. That is, until you make the conscious decision to step out of that archetype, like most people, you're probably stuck in. I know I was. I help people with it all the time. Fear is the opposite of love, which is your divine nature. At the root of all fears is the fear of death, which comes not just from our instinct, but also from the identification with the ego mind. In human terms, not spiritual, dying means the ego disappears. So naturally, it too will have its own survival mechanism. This big fundamental fear of death, ego death, is the big mama to all the other fears that we experience. The fear of opposition, loss, rejection, embarrassment, and of course the fear of invisibility, of not being seen or heard or even taken seriously. I know that was a big one for me. So if you were like me, then growing up you were afraid to lose the love and approval of those around you because their behavior and attitudes made it exceptionally clear that things weren't as unconditional as you might expect as an innocent child, and that it was tainted with their own unresolved issues, fears, and expectations. But from then on, you just simply continued projecting these internalized impressions into every new interaction. And it can be a very difficult habit to break without a safe and loving third-person perspective. Very difficult habit. Believe me. But believe me too when I say that love is your true nature. It connects you to the flow of life and that creative consciousness that's within you, that goddess we're bringing out. And whatever you let fear in whatever form it takes for any reason, whether past or future, real or imaginary, you block the flow of love and disconnect from your own self. This places you in that perception of vulnerability that robs you of your inner power to shape a better reality. I know that I suffered with it for a long time. Whenever you get attached or worried or fixated on something, fear is, I've found, 9 times out of 10, driving that perception. And then on top of it, it's energetically promoting the manifestation of what you're afraid of. Fear of suffering blocks healing. Fear of judgment blocks fulfillment. And so on and so on and so on. It's a big circle. And underlying it all is the fear of failure, and that is your ego's ultimate attempt at self-preservation, blocking that true inner power to create whatever you want. And it usually uses the voice of guilt to curb that and to keep you safe, which is its job, to keep you safe. Which brings me to my next point in this little rant for today. Guilt is the opposite of freedom, which is your divine birthright. Written in the Indigo Journals by Yul Swan, one of my all-time favorite spiritual books. If you haven't gotten it and read it, please do. I love it. It's a great quote that says, only awareness brings change and only love heals. So guilt, pretty useless. In fact, Unconscious guilt is your worst enemy. It robs you of your innocence and purity. It promotes self-judgment and self-sabotage. And it distorts your creative expression into perfectionism. Can you tell me how long I lived like that? Right? Guilt is invisible, and it's shady, and it's slimy, and it's sneaky, and it's destructive. It takes multiple forms and disguises to block that freedom. An example of one of the mechanisms which the psyche uses to protect the ego is if you feel guilty about something, often an unacceptable desire, like, you like a certain kind of music, right? You will punish yourself while denying the awareness of the original guilty feeling. It's crazy. It's like committing a crime to hide what your self-image or ego would consider a more serious crime, even if all of that is just imaginary. So from the perspective of the wounded archetype, nothing is more unacceptable than expressing yourself freely and openly, since in the past, it was often followed by a reaction that was not so pleasant. So it's all recorded. It's only just recorded. So please know that in your heart, in a dysfunctional world, you don't have to really do anything wrong to actually feel guilty. Guilt is the emotional currency of choice. It molds and manipulates behavior. Catholic guilt, Jewish guilt, mother guilt. Ringing any bells, people? It's all around us. And not to pick on them, but that's what I think came to mind. So just observe around yourself at any given time. It's easy to spot in others and, less so in yourself. But you'll see that rather than taking spiritual responsibility for their emotions and reality, everyone expects everyone else to meet their needs and then gets upset when they don't, like crazy people at the supermarket. The idea behind this is if you don't do what I want, you don't love me. Or it's reverse, if I don't do what other people want, I don't deserve their love or appreciation. I labored under that for so long. Fear and guilt go hand in hand. So much so that it's really difficult to discern where the fear ends and the guilt begins, and the other way around. And take, my own experience, for example, which is probably like so many of yours, is that I learned to live in fear of my self-expression because it would trigger a negative reaction from everyone else, So early on as a child, I learned to lie or hide things, which unfortunately turned into thought patterns and perceptions that disconnected me from myself as an adult, when all those fears should have been gone, right? But I know my experience is just one of a billion stories just like it now. So now what we have is a whole society that fears judgment and criticism and rejection, while also being judged and criticized and rejected by our own self, which is leading to a self-sabotage and disconnection from the flow of life and everything that we enjoy. It's a big circle. We're just going around in a circle. So here are some of the ways that unconscious guilt manifests, just to give you an idea, see if this rings true for any of you. Do you act impulsively only to feel ashamed afterward, like eating that ice cream? Do you beat yourself up with regrets about something you did or didn't do? Oh, I should have said that. Do you compare yourself to others to diminish who you are? Also known as comparison despair, and we've talked about that. Do you have an irrational sense that something's bad is going to happen, just looming constantly? Or you feel obligated to do what others expect of you, right? Long time. Or you feel disconnected or find no joy in the things that you do. It's a big one. Another one is when your life seems to lose its spark and everything feels gray, or you can't get motivated to accomplish your projects and goals. Let me be honest. It's not that you're necessarily doing anything wrong. It's simply that any impulse towards emotional freedom triggers resistance from the ego mind because it thinks it's going to die. And since it has access to all of your unconscious files and memories, it colors your present perception, keeping you stuck in that limiting viewpoint from the past. And that's how the cycle keeps going. Your sense of otherness determines how you judge and treat yourself through your interactions with others. So it's really important to transform this internal naysayer by nurturing those positive thoughts and strengthening your inner voice. Stretch beyond, further past those patterns of fear and guilt to express who you really are, which I know you're like, okay, easier said than done. I know. But really, it's very important to give yourself permission to open up to new possibilities. And if you want, you can totally contact me today, if you want. If you have questions about developing this emotional freedom of living your life on your own terms and without apologies, I would love to chat with you. But until next time, this is Daniela, your friendly neighborhood secret weapon. I'll talk to you soon.